Hello, everyone, and welcome to this recording for the film With This Light. My name is Alisha Gupta, and I'm a Humanity Rising ambassador. Humanity Rising is a student-led movement to create more compassion through this world with service and a mission to inspire youth. And I am currently been a Humanity Rising ambassador for over four and a half years now, and I'm just graduating UT Austin with a degree in marketing and business, also with a certificate in media and innovation. And so stuff like talking about films and seeing how it connects to bigger pictures in this world is a lot of what we do in our certificate. And I'm extremely excited to be here with both Jessica and Nicole to talk about With This Light. Just to introduce With This Light as a film itself, during 70 years as a nun, Sister Maria Rosa helped over 87,000 Honduran children escape poverty and violence through an ecosystem of social, educational, and entrepreneurial projects, inspiring an international network of supporters to expand her work. In the midst of civil wars, economic collapse, natural disasters, she continued her change to help young people such as Maria and Rosa break familial cycles of poverty and violence to create lives of their own. With This Light poetically interweaves the compelling present-day stories of these teenagers with the epic life and noble actions of Sister Maria Rosa. And I know when I was watching this film, a lot of that stuck out to me based on her being a female entrepreneur and still being able to ground that in roots of compassion. And so it's a very, very present and topical film, I think, for our youth generations, especially women and females, to be watching today. So I'd like to thank you both for taking your time and effort for not only being here, but producing and directing such an impactful film. And just to introduce the two wonderful ladies that we have here with us today, I'd like to first introduce Jessica Sarowitz. Jessica is a social impact investor and entrepreneur. As a Latinx woman and the daughter of immigrants, she seeks out projects around the world that directly benefit people of color with much needed facilities and resources. And she works in collaboration with communities in need to create transformative opportunities and experiences. Jessica founded Mia Flores Films to bring awareness to the stories of marginalized groups and amplify the voices of inspiring women through documentary film. Thank you so much for speaking with me today, Jessica.
Oh, thank you, Alicia. And just thank you for the invitation to speak to, all of the young leaders, young change makers that you have associated with Humanity Rising.
And I'm so sure they're going to hear this and capture something that is going to stick with them for a very long time, if not the immediate future. And I don't want to forget Nicole Bernardi-Reis as well, a producer and director. Nicole's work spans narrative, shorts, and feature films, documentary features, and television series, taking numerous projects from development to delivery for broadcasters, including PBS, A&E, and the Science Channel. Her independent documentary producing work includes Algren in 2021 and Radical Grace in 2015. And With This Light is her directorial debut. And additionally, Nicole serves as a creative coach and consulting producer for filmmakers as they launch their own films. She's produced and programmed film festivals and conferences and screenwriting conferences nationally. And she's a member of the Documentary Producers Alliance Labor and Sustainability Committee. Thank you so much for being here with us today, Nicole.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to talk about our film about young people in the future with young people who are so invested in the future. It's going to be a great conversation.
Absolutely. With that, I think it's only fair that we dive right into With This Light and some of the topics that came up when watching this film for me, and maybe topics that I think students will definitely resonate with. The first one, and I kind of mentioned this before, is being a female entrepreneur. I remember my father was an entrepreneur his whole life and kind of inspired me to think about entrepreneurship in a very direct way. And so a lot of my high school life, I was always on the edge thinking of innovative ideas or how I could take this one small problem and fix it for a larger community, or even turn negative experiences that I've had into a positive impact that can be mobilized, which actually started my podcast series, What Cause Inspires You. But it's not always that cut and dry. There's a lot of processes and a lot of obstacles that goes into being an entrepreneur, nonetheless, a female entrepreneur. And so being a female entrepreneur, like yourself and like Sister Maria Rosa, it's definitely important to not be afraid to lean on people. I think that's the biggest thing, is to lean on people, especially in times of growth. And I know Sister Maria stressed the importance of needing everyone to make a movement successful. And that's how she was able to build the houses to support women and children in need who had gone through terrible instances like giving birth from sexual assault or not having the money to provide for their families. And I remember she would say that she left at like 2 or 3 a.m. in order to build these houses for the children and start her mission working really early in the morning and late nights as well. And so it does take a lot of effort. And I just wanted to ask, based on that, what's the biggest lesson that you have learned about being a female entrepreneur from Sister Maria Rosa?
I'll start. So, gosh, I learned a few lessons from her. But really, it's the power of faith. When you're an entrepreneur, you have to have a lot of faith. Faith that no matter what comes your way, when it comes to challenges, because we all know that when we're trying to create a new project or have success in a business or a new project, a new initiative, it's not a straight road. The road is going to curve, it's going to go backwards. You might have to go around, below, above, whatever. And so really you have to have faith that your team that you've assembled, you yourself, will figure out a way to get through. And that's what it is. I mean, there's no other way to say it but that. You have to have that sort of faith in yourself, faith in your vision and the way in which you communicate that vision to others, to act and find a solution, co-create a solution, and ultimately keep it going.
For sure.
I just wanted to add, I think that, I mean, Jessica, you covered it so much, like so eloquently, but I think it's, you also have to be not, this is part of faith, it's not being afraid, right? And not being afraid to share your ideas, to share your passions, to talk to anybody. I love that sister said, you know, I would talk to anybody who would listen about my projects, because you don't know who the person is who you're going to, who is going to be as inspired as you are by that idea, or as touched, or who can see your vision and want to support it. And so it's really to, you know, I think for younger entrepreneurs in particular, you know, you think you've got this idea and you're so passionate about it, but you also don't you kind of want to hold on to it a little bit, maybe because you're afraid to share it. You know, maybe people don't want to hear it, but like, people, when you find the right people, they will hear your message, and they will see your vision, and they will want to participate in it.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's kind of a mindset shift in like a collaborative nature from being what could have been perceived as competitive in beginning. Because I know a lot of entrepreneurship or starting a movement or starting any sort of drive or impact in a community is definitely daunting and can almost feel like what you were saying, like this is my trademarked secret, because it's something that I'm so passionate about. So I hold so closely and dearly to myself. And maybe you don't know the people that resonate that same impact to you until you kind of shift to that collaborative mindset where you're gathering and fostering a community that can back you up and actually help grow that and drive that mission even further. So maybe even like a side question based off of that is, were there any instances in your personal career paths or you foresee in the future that you were able to gather that support from your community, and how did it end up helping you personally?
So I actually step into spaces with different projects. This is what I normally do. You know, like I'm creating new buildings, but it's not without collaboration with maybe a nonprofit who is deeply embedded in community, so, you know, that's what I always do. I mean, that's just always the mindset, like, who will I partner with on this? And sometimes it just takes some core key partnerships to really solidify, you know, that you're working with community. And for me, it's always been a nonprofit partner to create buildings, to create movements or be helpful to movements and raise awareness for a cause. So that's just the way I operate.
That's wonderful. And I think sometimes when, at least I'm in business school right now, when we're talking about, mobilizing and driving the economy or driving impact, I don't think nonprofits get as much rep as they should, because they're so powerful in kind of connecting the business ideas with the social impact that affects everybody in the community. So I think that's wonderful, with a forward mindset of partnering and helping kind of this mutual relationship between driving the nonprofit further, but also driving a mission that you're personally connected to further, to have like even exponential impacts in that community. Definitely.
One thing I love that Jessica says, I mean, Jessica and I have talked about it a lot, is because film is very collaborative, and documentary in particular, you are trying to shape something without shaping it. You're trying to capture something without putting your own imprint on it, for lack of a better word, because you're following people's lives, right? You're following their real lives. And so you can get into really stressful situations. And I think the key to remember is that everybody who's going to be joining you in your project, they're going to be bringing different skills, and everybody, and this is also a tenet of organizing, is that everybody's going to bring the skills they have to the movement, to the project, to the community, to whatever. And I think it's really understanding that there's going to be people who are really different than you, who have the skills that you don't have, and just kind of learning to give yourself and everybody space to bring their best to what you want to bring forward.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's something that us youth can definitely learn to do more, is capture the strengths of your personal skills and then play upon the strengths of the people in your community and your direct team in their skills. I remember in class, in one of our management classes recently, they have us write kind of this team report. And a part of that report is just listing down your strengths and your weaknesses and seeing how it kind of matches up to the deliverables. And I think that can be like taken on a broader scale, as like recognize where you excel, recognize where your team excels, and being able to match those up perfectly to kind of play to everyone's best interests. But
I think that's really, really important, because I think that a lot of times when you're younger, you really have to do more of that introspective work to understand what your aptitudes are. Aptitudes, because we all have some like natural skills or aptitudes that really jazz us up, that we really shine, right? We could be really good with an artistic sort of creative eye, right? Or art. Or we could have beautiful talents in the musical space, or we have an affinity or aptitude for that fine number. We get jazzed by data and numbers. And so, really have that sort of understanding of yourself, know thyself, right. And then figure out for that project, where else, what kind of multitude of diverse skill sets do we need in order to move forward with the project.
Yes, definitely. I think that can almost be an obstacle for youth who are trying to go and pursue maybe their own movements or start something up, or even just work in a team, is not realizing or being introspective. But I think, alongside all of that and the internal work that you need to do for yourself to build a movement, there's the external part of it too, where it's youth are told that they're maybe too young to achieve something, when in reality, I think, youth are usually the ones with some of the most innovative and creative ideas, that can lean on others for the experience part of it, or the systems part of it. And just a quick aside, when I was starting the podcast series, there was so many people before I met Debbie that shut me down, that would not listen to the first story that I wanted to talk about, which was my personal cyberbullying instance. And I had this dream of creating that podcast from a story of my personal instance, and allowing voices of other students to be told and connect with professionals to build a community on each individual impact. But there was so many no's before that one yes. And so I think youth can also almost get very discouraged by the amount of obstacles in saying that, you know, they're not good enough or they're not experienced enough to be able to start or create or, you know, actually have a meaningful impact. And I remember Sister Maria even stressed that one of the quotes was like, on the table, that's where we listen to children. That's where you really wanted to curate a sense of family and support for the children in our homes, and the guidance of children kind of taking their lives into their own hands and being able to say step by step, like, this is where I need to get, or this is what I need to do to get from A and B, and mobilizing youth to think in that way. And I thought that just really struck me. And I wanted to ask how you view youth today to be the change makers of tomorrow.
Okay, so this is what I'm going to be very intentional about what I say, because one of my pet peeves is tokenism, and you know, putting youth in spaces where you know, this is like the worst, when they're told we're going to give you agency, but then they're not, and that's tokenism, and where they're not given the agency to actually curate their own stories, or, you know, have the agency to build a framework around, you know, how they're going to approach things.
Yeah.
Right. And because someone from above or some other adult is saying, well, we know the better path.
Right.
But, you know, really that's not the purpose. The purpose is for the youth to come together as a cohort and to build that framework, build the path. And we, you know, as adults, I would say, we're probably going to learn something from that. And so we have to remain open to allowing that to occur. And Sister was good also about, you know, creating sort of spaces where youth could discuss what it is that was on their mind, was like in the Reyes Sireni school, right? And you saw in the movie where they were, you know, discussing their feelings around how to get safely to school and how they navigate that. That's a form of agency, is to talk about that amongst themselves, amongst their peers. And you know, I found that very compelling. What about you, Nicole?
I agree. And I think for me also, we forget that learning is, it's not a one-way street. Like, we all have the opportunity to learn from anyone we meet. And so that is a, you know, that is something that I think that a lot of older people forget. But and I also think that sometimes younger people are like, oh, you think you know it already, but we have new ideas. And sometimes those ideas aren't so new, they're just new to you. But I think that one of the things that was really beautiful about working with the girls in the film, and also working with our crew, because we had a primarily female crew, and they were Honduran, was really, and it was a multi-generational crew. Like, we had, you know, people, our DP was in her 60s, and then we had people working, you know, PAs who were in their teens and stuff. Was really understanding what we each brought, and how we could think about things differently. And I think that's just a really important thing to just remember overall, you know, is that the youth does have a lot to offer, and you know, to be able to have these new ideas and kind of have them workshop them sometimes with some people, older people who may have been around for a while and seen a bunch of things that have worked and haven't, I think it's really kind of key. And what I love is that for Sister, the being around those kids just gave her so much energy that she was constantly innovating. You know, she would have these ideas that people didn't even know there was a problem yet, and she already had a solution for it. So I think that was pretty amazing.
Definitely. I think just hearing both of you speak kind of reminded me of two main ideas. The first one is the fear of failure. And we talk about this a lot in an internal individualistic sense, where it's like, you cannot be afraid to fail. You need to learn. But I think the other part that maybe doesn't get as much light is almost like parents or an authority figure feel like the fear of their constituents or the fear of their youth or their children failing as well might create those bars. And so you need to, like you were saying, Jessica, give agency to the students to be able to fail and almost create that environment that where failure isn't this negative perception. Failure is a perception of learning, and it's a perception of growth. And that learning and growth is what's going to be able to build the confidence in youth. And I think the second idea that Nicole, you were saying something about, and definitely struck me, was this idea that gaining perspectives of a lot of people is what's also going to add and bolster that confidence. And so when we have diverse perspectives in the same room, then we're all failing and learning together. And so it's not necessarily you fail alone, but it's really you have your ideas, you bring these notions, you're able to share them, and you're able to exchange perspectives. And there's no right or wrong, but there is like learning and growth together from all the different experiences and upbringings and moments that we were able to have individually, but now we're having together, if that makes sense. So I think those two core principles are so important just for all of our generations to learn. And a quote that this comes straight from the film that really resonated with me was, you cannot take away the reality of life. You have to be careful not to give them everything. And I think this is exactly what we were talking about, where we're stressed in society, but especially in youth, to kind of take actions in your own hands. And no matter your situation, the cards you were dealt, to really live through it and learn through it. And it's no doubt that, you know, the families in those documentaries did not have the easiest upbringings, especially those teens, but Sister really did not want that to be a disabler in their stories. And one of the biggest situations was, you know, trying to go to university or trying to get an education. And there was a clip of this, I'm forgetting which teen it is now, but she was writing down everything she needed to go to the university herself. And she was really, really being pressed and pushed. She was like, okay, I need emotional support. I need the finances. And it's that like self-thinking guided by other perspectives that I think allowed her to take her own story into her hands and really emphasize this learning and practicing of life skills that maybe you weren't necessarily brought up with, but you can learn and grow into. And so a question from that is, you know, how do you find that confidence to start somewhere and kind of take your life into your own hands, especially when it can feel like the whole world is against you or doesn't really understand the pain that you are going through?
I mean, for me, honestly, I've always go back to what my dad used to say, that where do you find the confidence? If you're in the room, it's because you belong in the room. And for me, that always, you know, no matter where I navigate, whether it's, you know, executive boardroom, you know, as a leader, as a, you know, a follower in some community activist sort of activity, I'm there to do something. I'm there for a reason. I'm there to either, you know, help the group grow or help the group think through a problem or help the group, or I'm just there to march with the group, right? I'm there to support the group. So, you know, when you're in the different spaces, you have to really understand what is the value that I'm bringing here, and own that as powerful. That is your internal power.
100%.
And I would just add that confidence or lack of confidence or wavering, let's just call it wavering of confidence, right? Everybody has a wavering of confidence. It just doesn't go away when you magically hit 30 or 40 or 50. It's somewhere in your life there, you know, some aspect of your life you might not be as confident in something, and you just have to realize that other people aren't as well. And so it's part of being human, and you just need to keep putting your foot forward. You know, just like it's just that first step, and then you take a second step, and you just keep going, and you just got to get out of your own way too. And I love that Jessica's dad, she just said that to me a few years ago. And sometimes I think to myself, well, I'm in this room, so hey,
Definitely.
I might be the only person who's questioning why I'm in this room. So why just don't let that be the energy and the focus of it, right? Just kind of acknowledge it and just kind of push it aside.
Yeah, 100%. I think just to make it even more relatable for the high school and college students that might be listening in here today, something that I was told when I was going through job interviews was you got the interview for a reason. Like they looked at your resume. It's a very similar principle. You're in the room for a reason. You made it one step further. And so there's no need to doubt, but sometimes that imposter syndrome can creep in. And so I think this is also a beautiful place to just mention the importance of media in shedding light to, pun not intentional, but shedding this light to different situations that you might not know what resonates to who, but if it can crack that imposter syndrome and I'm not alone in this feeling, or I'm not the only one going through this type of situation, or even the feeling of if someone else can do it, I can do it too, to crack the imposter syndrome, then I think that's super important. That's definitely a powerful tool.
Yeah, I'd like to add something else that I know in business, a lot of times women see maybe a position that they want to reach, and there's like 10 qualifications. I'm just giving an example. And they say, oh, I only really have 5. Well, a man sees it and there's 10 qualifications. They only have 3. They're going to put their hat in the ring. Well, why, as women, do we not put our hat in the ring? Because you never know what it is that they're really truly looking for. And they already know, whoever's interviewing you or whoever's making that decision, that there's no perfect candidate with all 10 qualifications. So, you should put your hat in the ring and go for it.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that also goes to just what we were talking about, like the fear of failure, and the amount of no's doesn't dictate the yes, because you really never know what is going to land and what's going to click. And so if you can muster up the confidence to go for all of the opportunities and put effort into, and connect and be a part of the communities that will allow you to go for these opportunities, then you never know what's going to stick and what's going to land, and what that impact can come from it. This is switching gears a little bit, but since we're on the topic of women, I'd want to bring up an important issue in the film, which was, the fear of a woman being alone in society. And this can be, alone in trying to achieve your goals professionally with little support in the workforce, for example, or even like alone on the streets, walking home at night for the fear of safety, or alone in the feeling that maybe you have to be a sole caretaker of a family in a traditional sense, or especially for families outside of the States, I know that might resonate a little bit more. So I just wanted to ask, what would you tell maybe the men that are listening here today in a woman's life to help with empathy and support and allow for women to grow as individuals in society?
For me, I would tell the men to listen deeply when women are expressing, fears having to do with their own security, right? And be ally in helping them to, if it's a legitimate environmental safety issue, be present to, help them navigate a space or a journey that is legitimately, there could be violence. I mean, I'm not going to mitigate that. I'm not going to, there are some spaces like that. There are some places like that, that are, from their own security, they could be violent, they could be tricky to navigate. So, have some empathy and step up and allow to accompany them in these places. If it's something that the men feel is coming from a place of anxiety and it isn't, listen and understand where the root of that issue comes from, to just ask questions around it, because you can't really take that away from them. They have to sort of, that is their own internal power that they will have to resolve for themselves. But to be just a sounding board or a listening board, that is also very powerful, and it will alleviate stress around an anxiety of lack of confidence for a reason.
For sure. Nicole, what about you?
I think Jess answered it really, really well. I think I would just, two things I would add are just, first and foremost, but believe when they're telling you things. I remember when Me Too came about, and I had a really, really close male colleague, and he turned to me and he was like, it can't be that bad, right? It's not that bad, right? And I was like, no, it's that bad. Yes, it is. And he couldn't understand it until he directly asked me. And I was like, yes, this is why it's that bad, A, B, C, and D. But also I think it's tricky because men and women are different. We're all different. Individuals are different. Whatever aspect of our identities is different than other people's aspects of their identities. But I think sometimes people get caught up in that. I think I worked in a number of male dominated industries. And it's funny that sometimes you get treated like a guy, and as soon as they stop seeing you as a woman, like, things are much easier for you, but you're not. You're still a woman. And so I think it's just a matter of not forgetting that women are people, and that, if I don't remember where this quote was, but it was like, think about everything that you would want in life, right? And now think about it, and you're wearing a skirt. Like that, there's a lot of difference, but there also isn't, right? So it's just, I guess it's just approaching everybody as an individual, but also understanding that women have a different role in society, and sometimes that can box us in and pigeonhole us, and sometimes that makes it very dangerous for us.
Yeah. Definitely. No, I think that what you said right there definitely resonated with me, in terms of, I used to be in jobs that were definitely male dominated. I used to work in VC and investments in my early college years as internships, and I was one of two women in the entire internship. So extremely male dominated. And I thought that in order to be accepted, in order to be valued for my views and my perspectives, that I had to think, act, speak like the men in the room around me. And that notion quickly, as college went on, broke down for me, because it is definitely about embracing yourself as an individual, and the struggles that come from being an individual with your upbringing, your background. But also, if a part of that is being a woman, then it's being a woman, and it's embracing that side and getting people to empathize and to listen, and to what Jessica was saying, kind of have your story be the forefront, and not a hindrance, or not something that destabilizes you, but really that is playing to your strengths, and having that be your core to muster enough energy, power, and confidence to continue on in whatever play field. Because at the end of the day, we can't control the actions, thoughts, or feelings of other people around us. And so while the environment might not always be conducive to exactly how we want to work, or exactly, the support that we hoped to get, that doesn't mean that it should kind of hinder us or stop us from embracing who we are as people. And so on the flip side of that, taking your life into your own hands, how do you think women can reflect in the spirit and mindset of Sister, who was determined to essentially change her own future and take action into her own hands?
I think that's one of the really, the reason this film and films that show women in charge of their own life are really important, because as we were just talking about being a woman, I kept reflecting that Sister was this little tiny woman who was bossing around these very macho men through all sorts of crises, and she was, she held her personal power. she was open to people, she engaged people, but she, you know, she was in a situation where you wouldn't expect that of a woman, and she still did it because that is who she was. And so I think that having these stories and telling more of these stories, right, when you can see it, you can see it for yourself. And so I think it's a really important thing that we continue to shed light on women like Sister, and take her inspiration from her. I take inspiration from her every day. I mean, you know, she just was such a powerhouse who just was such a brilliant mind and such a funny human heart, but also could just like command a room like nobody's business, you know.
I'm going to say that for me, Sister had what I call this secret sauce of she knew how to navigate the human condition and the power of that social network within the human condition. Now, what does that mean? She had some powerful friends. But why did she have these powerful friends? And when I mean powerful friends, I mean friends that might be maybe performing, they might be performing what we would call a bureaucratic duty of just reviewing like a permit, and instead of being at the bottom of the pile, you're not at the top of the pile. Okay, that's what a powerful network of friends and allies can do for you when maybe you don't have that direct sort of, you don't perceive yourself as having that ally of friends or power network, but you do. And this was what Sister really understood. And because we're all connected, we're all, working in this ecosystem. And so, having these allies, these friendships, being of service to each other, really being one of these leaders that care about each other, then they will help you when you reach out for help and assistance, and you're helping each other out. And that's what she knew how to do. So I was always intrigued by this, and I think that that's why she had all of these, she could boss around all of these men, because, it's somewhere in her past, she had probably performed some sort of act of service for the mom, for the brother who was ailing in the hospital, for maybe she spoke up and made a recommendation for someone to go to school to be considered for a special program. So that is the power of the social network.
Yeah. And I think that is a beautiful sentiment to kind of hit home, is she didn't know that impact would carry on some sort of, would materialize in the future. Essentially, she was doing those acts of service out of the purity of her heart and the grace that she presented with herself, but she had no way of seeing the future. And so the idea of paying it forward was so real in her presence, where it was, I'm building the social network really organically and really truthfully and ethically, and not transactionally, if that makes sense. And that is such a nice way to kind of come back full circle. When we talked about community in the beginning of this screening, and we talked about finding support, I think the missing piece and the connector to that is finding that support genuinely and authentically, of where you're really connecting on a deeper basis of the impact that both people or both persons in that relationship can relate on, and not a transaction that is being performed. But once we find that connection and impact, then growing that community and learning from each other and the diverse perspectives. And I think with that, it really ties a beautiful bow on the film with this light. But before we do head out for today, this is definitely one of Humanity Rising's biggest missions, which is to really inspire young people to have the power to change the world. So as a final question for both you, Jessica, and Nicole, I'd like to ask, what inspires you personally, and how do you think that it can change the world?
For me personally, my happy place is being in community. What I mean by that is I love learning from others. I'm constantly learning from others. So I'm curious. It's just like having a curious mind, and why does it work that way? Tell me your perspective. Why does it work that way? Why does it work that way for you? What are you getting from it? What's the value you're getting from it? I mean, I'm always full of questions, and I'm just jazzed by being in new and different spaces, and it keeps me sharp, so I don't get into this like mode of groupthink or silo thinking, or then I'm like, or being in a creative space, like a film project, a museum, or looking at art, and it just opens my mind. And then sometimes I can run through a problem like that, but that's where I get my creative, inspirational spirit from.
Growth mindset, being around diverse perspectives.
Yeah, it's just always asking questions.
Yeah, for sure. What about you, Nicole?
I mean, I think that's just the key to having a good life, is being curious, to not be afraid of that you don't know. Like I there's so many things in this world I don't know, and I just love meeting people and hearing about them. I guess what really inspires me is people who are excited about what they're doing. Well, that, and I think also we need to take more time out in nature and just kind of have quiet times to reflect as well. It's not all just about like absorbing and doing. I think there needs to be time for rest and reflection. But even in that, there's so much you can do and you can learn. So
yeah. It almost seems like we're talking and circling topics of confidence, introspectiveness, and curiosity, and growing from those three principles to be able to really foster whatever movement or impact that you want to do as an individual. And with that, I just want to say a huge thank you so much once again for your time here today, but also your time and efforts putting together With This Light. I resonated so much with different components of the film, and I know students that are watching this today, but also have watched the film, will do so as well. And hopefully they gain something that they can carry on when they're going out and changing the world. So thank you so much. And with that, we are going to close out this screening and hope to see you all for more future podcasts.